Watch this.
What's a virtual breakfast with the governor taste like? No idea. But we do know what it looks and sounds like. We were virtually fed topics like the legislature and elections. It's a cross-country trek by truckers to focus on what they say is a forced loss of freedoms and why overpasses around southern Idaho were filled with supporters of the latest convoy.
You can't just walk them out of the orphanage. You have to literally pick them up and how do you do all that? How do you do that many?
As thousands flee Ukraine, a Boise family with an adopted daughter from there watch and worry about the others left behind.
I had a little bit of virtual bacon and virtual eggs this morning to start the day off, but there was no virtual smell of bacon in the room.
Some dad jokes there to begin the morning, and oh man, that's too bad because nothing says breakfast like the smell of bacon. A breakfast update from Governor Little, a lot different than the oatmeal we made with him 2 years ago. That was before a lot of things went virtual, though. This time around, a virtual breakfast with the governor. Like usual, though, Governor Little answered questions for about an hour during this annual event. Chief political reporter Joe Paris was lucky to get a seat at the table this morning and joins me now. Joe, we've heard a lot about these topics, or a topic we heard a lot about, I should say. We'll get to that in a second about election laws. But what about when it comes to things like voter IDs and absentee ballots? You guys talked about a lot of these things.
Yeah, it really, a common question for Governor Little today, Brian, was about the election bills because they all have emergency clauses in them, meaning that they would go into effect immediately. And we've seen text messages and calls from you at home saying, we don't think this is fair for the legislature to change the rules right before the election would start and would Idahoans even know about it. So we asked the governor and he reacted. This is how Little feels on the idea.
It does concern me that you change the rules and that a whole bunch of the electorate would not be aware of that change. And we'll see what happens. I generally don't comment until I see the bills up here. Depends on what happens on them, what gets amended. But I am concerned about changing the rules.
Specifically, would you have hesitations about signing these bills? And would you maybe have a qualifier that you would only sign these bills if they did not have an emergency clause?
I don't think they're very close yet. We'll look at them when they get closer. But like I said, the emergency clause changes the rules awful close to the time of implementation. And of course, it depends upon where they are in the process. But and in fact, again, if we're going to talk about litigation, if you change the rules, within a few days of when something's going to happen, you can bet that somebody will litigate on it also.
Couldn't the whole situation be avoided, though, if you set the expectation for lawmakers that it would be unfair to voters if they passed this with an emergency clause?
Well, I think you're all making this case right now.
And I can see that.
Yeah, so we kind of made the point for the governor. Now, another topic that we've seen sent into our text line in our newsroom, it's about the grocery tax. Brian, we've heard a lot about the grocery tax. State House leaders tell me that they too are hearing from Idahoans that want to see the grocery tax repealed. And Governor Little has been a part of this conversation for a number of years, as governor, of course, as lieutenant governor, and the member of the legislature. And he pointed out that there are some issues and clarity that need to be solved before you could even approach appealing the grocery tax.
When you go to the grocery store, everything you buy there, is that exempt or is it just food? And that's what I've said from the get-go. You got to define what you're exempting. There's food and then there's groceries. And then what are groceries? Which is a problem that exists in quite a few of the states. And then once after you say what groceries are, what do you do about people who want to say, well, we want to be groceries? Right now, if you buy cold chicken, you're exempt, but if you buy hot chicken, it's not. And there's a lot of other things that are encompassed in that. You can talk to the retailers about it. But if we could agree what food is and it didn't disrupt the budget too much, I think but every day that goes by, it gets a little more difficult unless our revenue continues to keep going up on what looks like a consistent basis.
So the governor seems open to the idea, but there's some clarification that needs to be made. We'll see if that happens this session, but if you read between the lines, sounds like maybe not. And we also, though, today get a juicy little tease on the all-day kindergarten topic. There are a few pieces of legislation right now floating around the State House that touch on funding optional full-day kindergarten for Idahoans. Lawmakers, though, they need to fund it, and Little made it sound like a deal is close.
My big issue is I want these kids reading proficiently, and I know that kindergarten's a big part of it. But I want to make sure there's resources there so these kids that, because it's still optional kindergarten, these kids that don't go to kindergarten, that the schools have adequate resources to help those kids get caught back up. And we are having fruitful discussions with the legislature about that very issue. There was a meeting in here that I was part of yesterday afternoon. And again, I spoke to some of the legislators last night. We're getting awful close to a pretty good consensus.
The governor was pushed on a follow-up question, specifically, what do you think this looks like, and when could a deal be made? He didn't really go into details there, but again, Brian, if you read between the lines, it looks like the funding of all-day kindergarten, optional all-day kindergarten, could happen as soon as this year. Overall, it looks like we kind of left that virtual breakfast still a little hungry for more, I think. At least I did. I don't know. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Virtual bacon doesn't fill you up. No. 2 election-related bills are moving to the full House, and both received public testimony against these bills. No public testimony was given in favor of them. The first from Representative Priscilla Giddings. It would ban ballot boxes from being used during elections, like at all. She told the committee last week she hasn't seen or heard of any issues with the ballot boxes in Idaho, but there have been a few allegations in other states like Georgia, she said. Not all Idaho counties use ballot boxes, by the way. Ada County, as well as some rural counties like Hawaii County, they do use them, though. Hawaii County Clerk Angela Barkle told the committee this offers residents a way to safely drop off their ballots without having to drive all the way to the clerk's office, which for some people can be an hours-long drive.
If it's not broke, why are we trying to fix it? As far as I know, there have been no issues with ballot box stuffing, or I guess that's the issue that we're worried about, or the safety of the ballots.
Every clerk in my district is opposed to this bill. We have people that drive quite a ways. I've used these drop boxes. They're secure.
Not every county that has drop boxes has security on these drop boxes. Really, my goal for this was to rebuild trust in our elections process.
But again, if it isn't broke, why fix it? Voter fraud is a claim that it has not been verified in Idaho, at least not since at least 2017, according to the Heritage Foundation. Despite all negative testimony, that did pass out of committee. One Republican, Representative Rod Furness, who you heard from there, he voted against the bill. And despite opposition from county clerks, election workers, and voters who testified as well, Representative Dorothy Moon's voter ID law also passed committee. House State Affairs sent House Bill 692 to the full House with a party line 12-2 vote. This is the bill that would do away with allowing those without proof of identification to sign an affidavit that says they are who they say they are in order to vote. It would also require documents to prove residency and citizenship to be presented at the polls.
You provide the residency and identification and citizenship for a first-time voter, and if not, you just don't vote. Removing the affidavit, it just needs to happen. If one illegal vote gets in and cancels out your legal vote, that is wrong.
While I believe this legislation has positive intention of continuing to keep Idaho elections safe and secure, it contains some flaws which lend themselves more to the disruption of the election process than to the securing of it.
I oppose this bill as it is written. That being said, again, I want to make it perfectly clear. I think we absolutely need to do something. I think proving citizenship here, while very well intended, will make it harder for naturally born citizens to vote than naturalized citizens.
Several high school students also testified this morning, all of them against the bill. If both of these voting bills do end up passing all the way through the legislature and then signed by the governor, they would go into effect immediately, as we talked about, because they may apply even before the May primary because they both have those emergency clauses written into them. More than a month ago, the Freedom Convoy shut down sections of Canada's capital and interrupted international travel between the U.S. and Canada. A large group of truckers who were protesting against COVID-19 mitigation mandates within their industry. Since then, there have been several attempts to duplicate the convoy across America. There was a highly anticipated one out of LA that fizzled out because of a lack of participation. Another one called the People's Convoy, which took off February 23rd from Southern California and is working its way east with plans to hit Washington, D.C. by this weekend. It's somewhere in Indiana right now. There's been a Texas convoy, an Alaska convoy, and a Northeast convoy. Now, a Northwest convoy, which would answer Margaret's question. Why are all these people holding American flags on our interstate overpasses around Boise, Caldwell, etc.? Well, Margaret, that would be to support the American Freedom Convoy, which began yesterday outside of Portland. Today, it passed through southern Idaho and the Treasure Valley. These convoys began with the purpose of protesting the COVID vaccine mandates Canadian truckers were facing. The U.S. has never had a federal requirement for truckers to be vaccinated, but they were needed if they were going to cross into Canada. So the convoys are, yes, to show solidarity with their Canadian counterparts, but also, and now mostly, to protest any mandate they might consider violating their personal freedoms. If you didn't have an 18-wheeler to join in, well, you could show your support by just showing up along the highways and overpasses, several of which were lined with people along the Treasure Valley corridor. We stopped by the collection atop the Cloverdale overpass just after noon. Spread across 8 lanes of Interstate 84.
We've been out here for an hour and a half.
Dozens of flag-waving and sign-holding supporters showed up for the American Freedom Convoy.
We've never done anything like this, and the people that I've asked here this morning, a lot of them said that they've never done this.
Standing on an overpass.
But it's an emotional statement, it really is.
Standing up for truckers and standing against any sort of COVID-19 mandate.
It's been a tough couple of years for everybody, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Well, is it for the truckers or for the people?
It's for both,
Okay.
Yes. Not having the mandates, being able to do what our freedoms allow us to do, and not being told that we can't do something, because that's not what America stands for. I mean, look at all the people here. They're all here for the same reason. A lot of the reason I'm down here too, my dad was a truck driver. I was born and raised in Boise. I do a lot of it for him. I think he would have been proud of this, just standing up for something.
Does it matter that haven't been mandates in Idaho like this?
We did have mandates. A lot of workplaces required masks up until Monday.
Is that a private business decision or a government decision?
I think that is both. Vaccines, we weren't a vaccine mandated state, but it's shoved down our throats. I don't appreciate that.
I'm guessing you aren't vaccinated.
I was not. Okay. Half my family is and half my family is not.
How's that work?
Not so good. Yeah. Really, it's divided a lot of my family members, a lot of my friends.
Those feelings of separation, of beliefs being passed over.
Well, yeah.
Are shared by others like Paul Teal.
All across the country, I think there's been a lack of respect for so-called we the people. That's our statement, is that we want people to know that we are for freedom.
If you haven't lost those like in Idaho, why come out today? I mean,
because we're one nation under God, and Idaho's a part of that one nation.
What kind of statement does this make today?
I think it makes a great statement that there are a lot of people that are tired of the mandates, tired of feeling like they're not being listened to.
It's kind of cool to get that reaction, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They enjoy it. We enjoy it. That speaks for itself, I think. I really do.
Think it'll make a difference?
I hope so. I don't know. Our current administration, I don't think they listen to what we're saying. But you know what? I did my part. We did our part. So I think it's the right thing to do.
Well, things kind of broke up on the overpass there right around 1 p.m. And as we mentioned, there are several convoys careening across the country right now with various names or even the same name, but just a different origin point. This one, the one social media flyers are calling the American Freedom Convoy, the one that began in Troutdale, Oregon, is expected to be in Peoria, Illinois on Saturday, where it will likely converge with other convoys, and they will also make their way to Washington, D.C. The images of war are almost too much to bear, even from 5,500 miles away. Young and old walking days to escape war-torn Ukraine. Not among them, a Boise teenager whose life was forever changed thanks to her new family. But before we get to that, anything on your mind that you'd like us to dig into? Anything you want to talk about? Share with us. Send us a text, 208-321-5614. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. Oh yeah, we're going to share a few of them at the end of the show, and one of them could be yours. Nearly 900,000 people have fled Ukraine during Russia's invasion. Mothers, children, even the most vulnerable, the sick, the elderly, those with disabilities who normally couldn't or wouldn't make such a long and often treacherous journey. They're doing it, though, to escape war. Promise Caldwell could have been among them, but tonight she is home safe in Boise with her family, who adopted her from a Ukrainian orphanage about 2 years ago. And now they're watching the war unfold and feeling helpless. Here's Katya Stepovic.
As thousands flee from Ukraine, among them are the most vulnerable, orphans and the disabled. But luckily for Promise Caldwell,
Remember me? Huh? Do you remember me?
she was adopted in Ukraine by a Boise couple over 2 years ago.
Dive in. She likes her legs like that. Okay, there we go.
Say bye to your orphanage.
Promise Caldwell is 18 years old from Western Ukraine. She has Down syndrome and is nonverbal. Promise grew up living the majority of her life in a crib, not being able to walk.
She was left in a hospital by her mother.
Her mom was like 16, I think, when she had her.
Yeah, we don't know much about her mother, but she was left, they said probably because she has Down syndrome. And then she was put in a baby orphanage till she was 5. When they're 5 and they have Down syndrome, they pretty much won't be adopted, so they are transferred to institution.
We had both been to Romania in the past, and we kind of knew some of the situations, you know, that some of the kids experience. And it's just tough because there's not as much assistance, not as much help.
So they chose Promise to help.
There's something about her. She's just, you're a beautiful girl.
While Promise is safe and surrounded by love, her parents, Luke and Miranda Caldwell, can't help but think about all the other orphans currently living in chaos, the ones that they couldn't bring home.
It's easy to see a picture and not like have anything behind that, but once you meet the kids and see that they're real and know that we're here and we're safe and they're not, it makes it really hard to just go on living here with all that we have.
Moms and kids are, you know, fleeing the country right now, and most of the caregivers are women that are taking care of people like Promise, and you know, hundreds, thousands. We've heard there's nearly 100,000 or more orphans in Ukraine, and so to think like, what happens if the caregivers need to go take care of their families and they have to leave? Like, what happens to these kids?
Before Russia's invasion, a man named Serge from America who had dual citizenship in Ukraine was helping find orphans a safe home.
He had a certain type of respect there that not a lot of people have, and he's like the key to some of those kids getting out of there.
He helped get Promise to her forever home, but the Caldwells say just a few days ago,
I was just like, this can't be real. This can't be happening.
They learned that Serge died fighting for his country.
Like literally in the streets of Kyiv.
As the Caldwells continue to mourn his loss, they're also keeping their eyes on the escalating tensions there, a place they know well after taking a number of trips there throughout the adoption process. They say despite the bloodshed, they believe Ukrainians will come out of this stronger.
They never seemed fearful, but I know that it was always in the forefront of their mind that it could happen again.
You could tell there was a lot of resilience in the people, and that they're just like, we love our country, we want our freedom, like we want to be able to do what we want to do.
They only hope that the rest of Ukraine's orphans can make it out of Russia's invasion and have that chance at life that Promise has.
Show them how you walk, show them how you run.
Yeah, she's come a long way in 2.5 years. And there are ways that people can help right here in Idaho. The Caldwells are working with an organization called Maya's Hope. They support children and orphans with special needs in Ukraine and have been doing so for over 10 years. And they say they need the resources and the care right now more than ever before. We'll have a link to where people can donate to that on ktvb.com. They have an emergency fund going on right now. Brian.
It's a side of war that doesn't get a lot of attention. I'm glad you were able to do that today. Thank you, Katya. All right, lots of comments sent in today about the trucker convoy heading across Idaho and making its way eastward, like this one from Ted. We weren't a mandate state, but it's been shoved down our throats, end quote, is all you need to know about these people. They are angry about something. They just can't tell you exactly how they personally were damaged. It's a result of propaganda and brainwashing, he says. This one from Becky, I believe. So the vaccine mandates are protested because they go against liberties and freedom. Do you think we can get a convoy to protect women's rights and LGBTQ plus freedoms and liberties? She asks. How are these convoy truckers helping with our supply chain deficits? Doesn't seem too patriotic, says Jenny in Boise. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe they had some time off, but that's a pretty good question. I've heard that a few times as well. Truckers and supporters look silly in light of Ukraine, where people are actually losing their rights to tyranny, says Randy. It's a good point, Randy. Yeah, there's a lot of things. It's all about perspective, isn't it? Which we do try to offer it. But the people out on those overpasses today, that was their perspective and why they were standing out there and choosing to support the trucker convoy that was heading east out of Oregon today. It's becoming quite obvious. Most legislators don't really care much about what citizens have to say at committee hearings in Idaho. Why waste time on hearings if the GOP legislators have made up their minds beforehand, asked Steve. A lot of good questions today, and that is one we've seen before as well. A lot of things people speak out against, pass anyway. You are the most ignorant, uninformed, and pompous idiot on TV. Congrats. Wow, really? That's a long list to be a top of. Are you sure? All right, we'll see you tomorrow.